Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, June 12th, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about the 2022 midterm elections and the Republican Party's most significant / major problem for the upcoming midterm elections. Now, to be completely out there, the problem lies in the candidates, not necessarily the party's messaging. The Republican Party is a very broad party. They have those who voted to convict President Trump, those who voted to keep President Trump, those who are unhappy with the current state of things, and those who are more than happy with the status quo. Altogether, the Republican Party has a bunch of varying ideologies, some more extreme than others, and you find it to be very interesting looking at some of these congressional, senatorial, and just general primaries on the statewide level, such as governor, secretary of state, etc. These primaries show us that the Republican Party is very much diverse, not necessarily just in thought, but also just in terms of candidate quality and candidate ability within these races. President Donald Trump is a major factor in the Republican Party as of right now, and I will say on some states he has begun to choose the correct candidates for a primary, meaning that he chooses the most electable, most beneficial candidate for the Republican Party, versus others where we really see some significant drawbacks. Considering how close we are in the House of Representatives right now, with the majority being 222 to 213, we can take a look at that right now, and then going over to the Senate elections where the margin of victory and margin between the two is 50-50. All we see is that every single thing matters. Every single race, every single congressional race, meaning Senate and House, all the candidates, all the primaries, everything matters for these midterm elections because they are so consequential for both political parties. And the Republican Party, I will say, and giving them props on one hand, has done the correct thing in some states. They chose the right nominee for Virginia's 2021 governor race. They did that through the intentional movement towards a convention-style, delegate-style voting system for their nominee. They have chosen successfully through a regular primary system in North Carolina and other states where there are competitive races that at least maybe President Trump isn't choosing one candidate or is choosing one candidate, where the primary does go the right way, such as Georgia, where Donald Trump did oppose the incumbent governor, Brian Kemp, from running for re-election, but ultimately Brian Kemp won by 50 points, and that was absolutely the correct choice for the Republican Party. The point being that the Republican Party has done some things correctly, but we can't ignore a lot of the bad. The Republican Party's most major problem as of right now is truly candidate quality. As it stands, the Republican Party should win control of the House, and though my estimations don't expect them to win control of the Senate as of today, I easily see it happening if just something was to suddenly shift by 1 or 2 percentage points nationwide. Just where we are right now, I may not be expecting the GOP to win it, but if they were to win it, I would not be shocked in the least bit. And we're looking at the Politico forecast for 2022, showing us that they expect the House and the Senate to both go to the GOP, but the governorships, on the other hand, they expect most Americans to be led by Democratic governors. Now, the interesting thing about that is that that rating was not actually consistent over the past few months. They came as a result of primaries, most notably the Pennsylvania gubernatorial primary, in which Doug Mastriano was chosen for the Republican Party. And when you take a look at the reason why this rating came to be, the shift from toss-up to lean Democrat, you find that amongst many reasons, they say that candidate quality was a determining factor into why they chose Josh Shapiro, the Democratic Attorney General, above the Republican Party. It was candidate quality that shifted it in favor of the Democratic Party, and that is consistent in many other states. I've decided to label some of the Senate and governor states that we are looking at in terms of toss-up status or competitive status because they give you a good idea of where candidate quality matters and why it does matter. We're not going to be focused too heavily on the House elections. We'll talk about it in passing, but since there are 435 races and a lot of primaries have yet to occur, I'm not going to go ahead and look at each individual race and talk about some poorer candidates in terms of quality. I will also say that candidate quality matters a lot less on the House level. Obviously, a very popular incumbent will win re-election, but when it comes down to wave years, typically people will vote by party and House elections more than anything. People are much more willing to invest their time into research, into governor candidates, or even Senate candidates than they are to local House races that they probably might view as inconsequential entirely. We're only focused on the Republican Party here, talking about candidate quality, because this is where I really see the drawback of having so many differing ideologies within your political party. Ones that can be labeled as extremist or out of the ordinary for your party, whereas other times it might be labeled and brandished as the standard Republican Party. There are some things within the GOP that I simply can't can't wrap around my head, and I think it really damages the Republican Party's structure and ability to win in these midterm elections. So, on your screen right now, we're looking at the 2022 Senate map. We have Arizona, Missouri, Pennsylvania, and the state of New Hampshire. While there are some solid blue and solid red states where I might otherwise talk about lackluster GOP candidates, these are the states where the GOP candidate quality really does matter. And we've seen it in polling data and numbers that tell us that there will be a significant pushback on the Republican Party should they choose incorrectly with some of these candidates, and already have chosen incorrectly. The state of Arizona has Blake Masters, who is, on one hand, some people view him as electable. On the other hand, and in my point of view, I don't see him as such. While he very well could win simply because of our national environment, he's not strong, he's not enthusiastic, and he's certainly not what I expected from the state of Arizona. Many of these states have top-tier candidates that refuse to run because they don't think they would win a primary, or because they might have opposed President Trump on one hand and wouldn't want to risk running against someone who was endorsed by President Trump. There are many representatives, former senators, former governors, current governors, that could run in many of these states, and they refuse to because they are afraid of losing and because they know that some of them simply will not get the endorsement of one person in particular. Blake Masters in the state of Arizona has received the endorsement from President Trump. In the state of Missouri, I point this one out because the former governor of the state, who had to resign amidst a sexual harassment scandal, is now running and is the frontrunner for the Republican nomination. Polls show him underperforming other Republicans by sometimes 10 to 15 points. Pennsylvania just nominated Dr. Oz, a celebrity surgeon. He's not exactly someone I would have thought of in the state of Pennsylvania as the most viable, most electable, or strongest candidate for the GOP. That state itself should have been a state where the Republican Party could have had someone from the bench, but they simply didn't have it. The state of New Hampshire, similar. They had Chris Sununu, the incumbent governor who could have ran. He decided against it, and now the GOP is scrambling between the Senate Majority Leader and also other candidates, none of which who I think are strong enough to defeat Maggie Hassan at this point in time. New Hampshire has largely remained in the Democratic column for very good reason. The GOP, and the point is, the GOP simply has not fielded the strongest, the brightest, etc. types of candidates for these races. While some of them are not solidified, such as Arizona, Missouri, or New Hampshire, these primaries generally are easy to predict ahead of time. President Trump's endorsement will boost many of these candidates should they get it. In the state of New Hampshire and Missouri, we don't have a Trump-endorsed candidate, but in Pennsylvania, the Trump-endorsed candidate won. In Arizona, the Trump-endorsed candidate now seems to be rising in the polls and rising to political relevance within the state. But it's not just the Senate level. But looking at these races, Missouri, if should the Republican frontrunner right now win this nomination, it looks like it's going to be a single-digit race in a state that President Trump won by 16, 17 points in both of his elections, and it's a red wave year. In the state of New Hampshire, an easily winnable state for the GOP, should they choose any of the top three contenders, on the Republican side, it does not look as if they are going to win. In the state of Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz is certainly not the strongest or most electable candidate that we could see within the state. He could win because of our national environment, but he definitely isn't a shoo-in or someone who we can bet on months in advance at winning the general election. And in the state of Arizona, the same thing goes for Blake Masters. These races should have either been safe or otherwise very easy to flip. And somehow, the Republican Party, the party that is up 3 points nationwide, is struggling for victory in states that should be relatively easy. But like I said, it's not just the U.S. Senate where this candidate quality is significantly pushing back the Republican Party's means of advancement in the U.S. Senate or in the U.S. House or anywhere else. The governor level are races where we have much more localized and important elections, especially as this consideration about Roe v. Wade is expected to be released from the U.S. Supreme Court. I've highlighted a few states where I think the candidate quality is subpar for the GOP frontrunners or already declared nominees. In the state of Maryland and Massachusetts, you might be surprised to see those two states, but they were very solid Republican states back in 2018, though they did elect Joe Biden and voted for Clinton, elected Obama, these states were willing to elect a Republican in 2014, a Republican that went on to run for re-election in 2018, both of which won. And now, looking at these two states, there were opportunities for Republicans to retain them. In the state of Maryland, the Larry Hogan, who is the governor right now, who is popular across the state, has endorsed and chosen a nominee. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has chosen somebody else. In the state of Massachusetts, Charlie Baker is the popular Republican governor. He's not term limited. He could have ran, but decided against it out of a fear of losing the primary because Donald Trump chose somebody else. These two states would have been winnable for the GOP, could have been holdable, but they gave it up because they chose to choose the wrong candidate because they might have represented them slightly more as a Republican. These two states were fumbles for the Republican Party, but it doesn't stop there. Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano, someone whose name being invoked, shifts the voters in Pennsylvania by 11 points to the left. The Republican Party did an internal poll across the state days before the primary. And what did they find? That in a generic ballot governor matchup, a generic Republican defeats a generic Democrat by 3 percentage points. When they directly mentioned Doug Mastriano and Josh Shapiro being the Democratic nominee, they declared and found that Josh Shapiro, the Democrat, wins statewide by 8 percentage points. Just mentioning the two names of the now nominees for the state of Pennsylvania shifted the margin by 11%. That's mostly because Doug Mastriano is an exceptionally weak GOP candidate. In the state of Michigan, 5 Republican candidates were disqualified from the ballot for cheating. They forged signatures, knowingly or not. Their campaigns submitted forged signatures. Then everything was shaken up. It was left down to 5 candidates, and then one person, Ryan Kelly is that one candidate, became the new frontrunner. Well, guess what? Days after that poll was released, Ryan Kelly was arrested by the FBI on January 6th charges, which now leaves 4 viable GOP contenders out of an original pool of 10. Gretchen Whitmer is more than likely going to hold on because of this GOP shenanigans, because they lost their frontrunner twice. They lost their top performing Republicans 3-4 times. They appealed to lower courts, denied. Appealed to the Michigan Supreme Court, denied. Everybody said no, and the state of Michigan now has a Democratic governor who is extremely, extremely lucky, and a Republican Party that is fractured and without a clear and consistent frontrunner, and an electable one at that. For the state of Arizona, Kari Lake was chosen as the nominee. She is an extremist if there ever was one. But that type of ideology and rhetoric doesn't seem to be proving too effective in the state of Arizona. Again, this should be a state easily won by the GOP. Joe Biden won it by less than 1/4 percentage point, or around 1/4 percentage point. But when Republicans are sometimes down in polls, when they're up 3 nationwide, when they're only ahead by 1 in a state that should be giving them a 6-7 point victory considering where we are nationally, it shows you the weakness within the Republican Party. And it results and stems from that nominee. Looking at many of these races, they are rated the way they are because the Republican Party simply cannot field their strongest candidates. The Republicans have made good choices and have fielded the right people in some states, such as Georgia, Ohio, Florida, in states where you have incumbents who were challenged heavily, where Republicans decided to stick with the incumbent, or with popular incumbents in some of these states. But when I see the mess up that is Massachusetts, Maryland, Michigan, Pennsylvania, I see it more as the Republican Party really messing up, because this and these races were very, very winnable. The Republican Party's problem is no longer winning on the generic ballot because they've done that. Though they weren't there in 2020, though they weren't there in 2018, they were there and are there now for 2022. The last time Republicans led in the generic ballot was in 2014. This is the first time in nearly a decade that Republicans have taken the lead. And they did it. What are they doing with Biden? They're keeping his approval rating numbers down. What are they doing with practically every other Democrat? The exact same thing. Yet there seems to be a reason as to why these ratings show some of these states that should have been easily winnable as lean Democrat, as tilt Democrat, and sometimes likely Democrat. These races should not be as contested as they are. It should not be as pro-Democrat as they are. The Democrats have really benefited from a lot of the choices the Republican Party has decided to make. And it shows you that at the end of the day, one of the most important, in fact, probably the most important factor for these midterm elections is the primary, is the nomination process, is and are the candidates. Because they will be the ones representing their party in D.C. They will be the ones representing their party at the ballot box. And so far, Democrats don't seem to be messing up with their choices. On the Senate map, every single one of the Democrats are running for re-election, except for one in Vermont. Republicans, on the other hand, had 5 retirements in 2022. In Missouri, in Alabama, in North Carolina, in Pennsylvania, and in the state of Ohio. That left it up in the air, left open primaries, and thus weaker candidates. They left them with those who hadn't been tried and tested in years such as 2016 or 2010 or even 2004. Many of these Republicans have lucked out in their primaries, but there's no guarantee that they will luck out in the general elections. Some of these candidates, I would say, are just so weak that I simply don't see them winning in 2022 at this point. While many of them I still leave it to the possibility that there is a victory for an opposition party or an incumbent party, the choices that have been made here are likely going to be very detrimental to the remainder of these midterms for the Republican Party in some states. Democrats, of course, can mess up, have messed up, and could choose wrong candidates on the House level, Senate level, governor level. But so far, a lot of this has been on the GOP, mainly because they have had the most open races. But that also doesn't help their case, because at the end of the day, voters are going to look at some of these candidates and recognize that they don't want some of them to win, that they don't agree with some of them, even if they are willing to vote for Republicans and are unhappy with the Democratic Party. I would not be shocked if we ended up in a position where the Senate remained for the Democrats and the House went to the GOP, despite both of them being exceptionally close and well within reach for the Republican Party. Some of these states, I think, are messed up for the Republican Party simply because of shenanigans and things that have happened entirely outside of the control of just one candidate. But ultimately, it looks negatively on the Republican Party, and it simply does not give them the electability or the candidate quality that is otherwise needed to win many of these races. But like I said previously, there are some shining places where the GOP really has made the right decision, but I can't say it has been smooth or seamless as maybe the 2010 or 2014 midterms otherwise were. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 governor election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.